Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Turner. I am the president and senior scholar at the Policy and Economic Research Council based in Durham, North Carolina. It's my great pleasure today to introduce to you an august panel of experts on today's topic, which is dealing really with credit bureau data and a policy of suppression deletion in response to the healthcare crisis around COVID-19. As all of you are aware, during the pandemic, during the early days when unemployment spiked, people struggled to make ends meet. And lawmakers, wanting to respond to their constituent situation, felt it was unfair that they should be punished for things that weren't really their fault, specifically having stains on their credit report, circumstances beyond their control. So the CARES Act implemented a policy where lenders were instructed to work with borrowers who were experiencing duress and provide accommodations. However, as the pandemic has gone along in the United States and globally, there are considerations for other measures, what can be done. And one such policy, known as suppression and deletion, was put forward in the HEROES Act, which would effectively prohibit the reporting of all negative data in an attempt to protect consumers. So our organization, with the support and assistance of the SFEPD, was able to actually analyze this quantitatively, looking at over 10 million credit files. And the results of the analysis are extremely interesting and very telling. And we hope they'll interest and intrigue you. And we hope that they'll be of great benefit to lawmakers as well. We are privileged and pleasured today, or enjoying today the participation from different perspectives. Mr. Ted Daniels, who is the chair and founder of SFEPD, comes with a long background in financial education and financial literacy. And he will share with us why his organization supported our research and how he thinks it can be of great value to communities and constituents about whom he's focused, particularly younger persons who are just entering credit markets and people who have struggled with access to credit traditionally. In addition, we have Patrick Walker, who's the Senior VP of Research from the Policy and Economic Research Council, who will top line the key findings from the study and talk about their relevance in terms of the ongoing policy debate around COVID-19 and credit measures, and also talk about what policy prescriptions are available to lawmakers that are wanting to help their constituents deal with these unusual circumstances. Thereafter, we have Bill Cheeks, who has a very long career in both credit reporting, where he worked with Equifax for 35 years, but then a second career in financial education and literacy, playing a ground floor level role with Operation Jumpstart, or the Jumpstart Coalition rather, as well as ABBA Associates, his current firm. In addition, we have the president and chair of the Credit Builders Alliance, Dara Duguay. And Credit Builders Alliance is really a unique organization that has many smaller and niche lenders, micro lenders, circle lenders, and so forth, that come to CBA to be able to have their borrower payment data included in mainstream credit reports by Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, and helps them with technical assistance and helps them comply so their borrowers can actually, or their members' borrowers can build a credit history and migrate into mainstream credit. And both Bill and Dara will be offering their perspectives on the significance of this finding as well. So let me turn the floor over to Mr. Daniels for opening comments and his views on the significance of this research and why his organization supported it. And we look forward to our continued partnership with SFEPD in the months ahead. Ted, over to you.
It's good. Well, thanks very much, Michael. As you know, the Society for Financial Education and Professional Development, SFEPD, the primary mission is to enhance the financial literacy and of Americans. And we spent a lot of time but putting special emphasis on the Black community and underserved communities, as well as the young adults coming into the market, as you just mentioned. And we always want to make sure they have all the knowledge they need to make good decisions. But we also want to make sure they're protected from policies that are put in place that can impact them uh, to, uh, to limit their ability to grow financially, as well as cause the economic disparities to further um, impact their lives. So when I had the opportunity to work with Perk on this project, it was exciting for me because it's just something what we want to do anyhow, is try to make sure we give as much information to our target audience as possible. And we know that our target audience primarily is subject to a lot of arbitrary decisions about their credit worthiness. And the report was show that when you suppress the data, the lenders get into a situation where they started making arbitrary decisions about the credit worthiness of individuals, and in large measure those are people who are underserved, as well as in people of color. So we thought that it was worthwhile to pursue this type of research so we could make it available to policymakers, so they would understand the impact of what was being proposed. But in the meantime, we also will share what we learned from the report with our target audiences, because we want everybody to do well and everybody have a fair playing field when they go into the marketplace. Now, we also found out when we did the study that we have situations where the telecom industry does not report positive data, payment data, only negative data. Well, that's going to affect a lot of people. Regardless of their race, regardless of their race, of that level, the economic level. So we always also found in the report that it's going to be important that we look at the positive data as well from telecom companies, because we got 300 million people in this country, and probably 275 million of them have cell phones, so it's impacting a lot of people. So we want to look at how we can do that in terms of trying to make sure that everybody enters the market on a even playing ground, where they're not making arbitrary decisions not being made, and there's full disclosure about their payment history, because they impact people and delay uh, their financial growth over a lifetime. I was talking to a person the other day. He said, "Look, I made some bad decisions. Now, it's one thing to make bad decisions, and be impacted, but when someone is making an arbitrary decision about you, it's going to cause you to delay what you're trying to accomplish in terms of creating wealth for yourself or enhancing your financial well-being to 2 or 3 years or 5 to 7 years down the line. We need to address that. So we're excited about the report and what we found here, and the recommendations that included. Michael.
Hey, Ted, appreciate that. Thanks for putting that in context. There are a lot of vulnerabilities that aren't self-evident to people given what's happened with COVID. And the natural inclination is to think that if lenders aren't reporting late payment information, then credit scores will rise and people will be protected against harms. And that's a good thing, isn't it? Well, Patrick Walker has analyzed this using hard evidence, using actual credit files in different contexts when we had economic duress or a downturn in the business cycle, and then under economic stability. And he was able to simulate the impacts from suppression and deletion. And here today, it's my great privilege to introduce my longtime colleague and friend, Patrick Walker, who will share some of these very stimulating findings with you in the context of COVID and suppression deletion. Patrick?
Thank you very much, Michael. So the simulations that we performed were not on the CARES Act, which was actually passed, which were the accommodations that Michael was discussing. Instead, it was a much broader, more wide-scale suppression and deletion of all derogatory information on all consumers. And so to simulate this, we used credit files from 2010, 5 million credit files in all, and 5 million files from 2017. In addition to those snapshot years, we also had an outcome file for each of those, and that was in 2012 and 2019. So by simulation, what we mean, for instance, this is an example for the 2010 file, the October 2010 snapshot. If you look at the 12 months of suppression, what we're doing essentially is removing all derogatory negative data, such as consumer late payments for credit cards, mortgages, auto loans, as well as collections and the like, between October 2009 and October 2010. So 12 months of negative data suppression. And the examples below show you, and we have a full listing of all the suppression rules in our report. Those are examples of how the data was suppressed. And what the results show is, as you would expect, that if you look at the base example, which has no suppression, the average credit score in 2010 in our sample was 675. However, with just 6 months of negative data suppression, that rises to 682. And as you can see, it rises further and further the more data suppression there is, or negative data suppression, to be clear. So as you can see, as you would expect, raw credit scores do in fact rise when negative data is suppressed. What policy advocates probably don't consider, however, is when you suppress the accurate, predictive, though negative data, what you're doing is you're degrading the credit scores, and you're making them less able to rank order consumers. So, for instance, with a 640 credit score cutoff, with no suppression, a lender would expect a 5.6% portfolio default rate. And this was obtained using our actual outcome file. So these outcomes were not simulated. This is what actually occurred with the consumers. However, as you can see, if you have just 12 months of negative data suppression, because the credit scores are now degraded and can't determine which consumers are high risk versus lower risk, that same 640 cutoff results in a much higher default rate, in this case of 8.5%. So what that would mean is that lenders would need to compensate for that increased delinquency by actually raising their credit score cutoffs. And so this chart actually combines both of those ideas. Here you can see, using 2017 data from our simulations, that the raw credit scores do in fact rise for consumers, as we mentioned. However, the credit scores needed as cutoffs to maintain a 3% delinquency rate also rise, but they actually rise much higher than the average credit scores. So those raw increases in credit scores are actually an illusion, that credit access is actually going to be reduced for consumers. And this illustrates the degree to which, and this uses 2010, the 2010 sample, the degree to which credit access would actually be reduced. Here, for all consumers, credit access would be reduced 18%. So it would fall from the 100% with the base case down to 82%. However, this impact is very much uneven. Here you can see it's actually the youngest borrowers that have the biggest reduction in credit access. And this may be because younger borrowers have thinner credit files and they're more on the credit margins. So as those credit score cutoffs need to rise, they are perhaps more impacted. Here you can also see that it's the lowest income households that also fare worse relative to the higher income households. Credit access for individuals in the 30 to 49,000 household income range, access falls about 20% to 80% here. However, for the highest income households, it falls only 15%. So lower income households fare worse. We also see that individuals in Hispanic, Black majority, and minority majority communities also fare worse than individuals in white, non-Hispanic majority communities. So there's definitely uneven impacts and disparate impacts. This table, a lot of numbers on the table. I'm just going to focus on the row that's second to the bottom. And this has a few ideas combined. The first starts with the base case of 100%. And then if you move to the right, you can see, okay, if we layer on 24 months of suppression of just open derogatory accounts, credit access would need to decline about 17% to 83%. If you further suppress not just the open accounts, but also the closed derogatory accounts, you can see credit access would fall further down to now 73% of the base case. If we also layer onto this the simulation of if consumers also responded to the fact that negative data was no longer being reported, if they actually increased their delinquency, in this case, if you look at the last column, let's say consumers doubled their delinquency. So for instance, a portfolio that normally would have 1% derogatory or delinquency rate, if that doubled to 2%, then what you would see is lenders would have to respond both to the degraded data and the changed behavior from the consumers. Here, credit access would fall nearly 60%, down to 41% of the base case. And again, if we keep that 41% in mind and we look at how it impacts different members of the community, what you see is, again, it is the younger members of the community that are much harder hit relative to the older members. It's also individuals who live in minority majority communities that are also much more negatively impacted from this. So clearly, the subtraction of negative, though accurate and predictive data, definitely harms consumers and definitely has disparate impacts. On the other hand, another policy solution would be to add positive data or add full file data. As an example, the CFPB found that between 2013 and 2018, about 22% of consumers had a telecom collection added to their credit file. However, telecom companies do not typically report the on-time accounts. What you can see is that for subprime consumers, this rate was much higher. So nearly 60% of subprime consumers had a telecom collection added to their credit report. All we're advocating for is why not have the telecom companies also selectively report their on-time accounts, even if they don't want to report full file. So they're currently selectively reporting their collection customers. Why not also reward their on-time customers? And we can see who this would impact. In 2012, conducted a study on what the impact of adding utility or telecom payment data to credit reports would be. And what we found is overall credit could increase around 8%. However, disproportionately, those that would benefit would be the lowest income households. Not shown here, but also in their report, it shows that it's also the youngest individuals in society. It's members of minority communities who also disproportionately would benefit. So this is kind of the flip side of removing negative data, that by adding positive data or even on-time data for telecoms, you would actually benefit overall the entire credit reporting system, but in particular, the lowest income earners in society. So adding positive, accurate, and predictive data benefits consumers. And hence, addition is better than subtraction. And I will leave it there in the interest of time.
So I guess I'm next. Hi, everyone. My name is Dara Duguay, and I'm the CEO of Credit Builders Alliance. And Michael told you a little bit about CBA, but we are a national nonprofit network of almost 600 nonprofits, and many of them are nonprofit lenders that have the designation of community development financial institutions. Essentially, their mission is to lend in distressed neighborhoods. And so many of the borrowers that they lend to are people that are credit invisible. And that's what I'd like to spend my time talking to you about today is credit invisibility. Because we see it all the time among our members' borrowers, and it's pervasive in society as a whole. And so if you think of the United States, we have anywhere between 50 to 70 million people that are what is called credit invisible, which means if you pulled a credit report, there wouldn't be any information on it. And so without having any information, lenders usually don't have a basis to make a decision when they don't have any historical information about that individual. And so it's just easier to say no, quite frankly. And so if you talk about credit reports and how they've sort of evolved to become very, very, very powerful, very important in so many areas of our lives, not just lending decisions. We talk about credit reports that are important in hiring decisions. Many employers, in fact, 50% of employers in this country use a credit report as part of the screening process during hiring. Some states do not allow that, but many do. So it ends up about 50% or half of employers. These are all kinds of jobs. These are jobs not just that require a security clearance that you might assume, or not just jobs that are in financial services that you might assume. But we hear through our members that all kinds of jobs like cashier, working in a library, in a gym, and they involve credit reports. Also, credit reports are really important in tenant screening. Most property managers use a credit report as part of the tenant screening process. So people find if they don't have any credit history, again, there's nothing to base a decision on. And so many times property managers just say no. And so the credit report is just really, really, really important in today's society. And if you look at the fact that Black and Hispanic individuals are twice as likely to be credit invisible than the population as a whole, we really need to sort of hone in on those populations and really see what we can do to help make them credit visible. And so how do you do that? And even more than that, what happens when there's need for credit and you don't have the ability to get it if you are credit invisible? If your credit invisibility provides, or it essentially causes a barrier, what are your options? And one of the things that Credit Builders Alliance did recently was a series of focus groups. And we did focus groups in 5 different cities. And they were cities that were very varied. So we, in geography, varied by geography, varied by racial and ethnicity. And so we did focus groups in Los Angeles and Detroit and Dallas and Chicago and Washington, D.C. And even though these were all places that were very diverse by many different sort of metrics, we found that the answers to certain questions were the same. And so one of the questions that we asked was, if you do not have access to credit, but you have need to pay for an emergency, an expense of maybe $300 or $400, and it could be any type of emergency, anything like a plumbing repair to fixing your car. But if you did not have access to credit, what would you do? And we found out that there was 2 top answers. And one of them was that people would ask their family and friends. And so, that's fine. But what happens if your family and friends also, don't have the ability to have access to credit? And so that might not be a solution. And then the second most common answer was that people said that they would sell something. And so, if they don't have access to credit to help pay for this emergency expense, we found that people would go to pawn shops, they would put things on eBay, they would have garage sales, they would see what they could do about selling something. And so those were the two most common answers. And wouldn't it be better if you had access to a credit card where you could put that plumbing repair or that car repair on your credit card and charge the $300 or $400 and then pay it back over time? And so that would be a much better sort of outcome. But you can't do that if you don't have a credit history, because most unsecured credit cards would not approve you. And so that's why Credit Builders Alliance is really, really, really hyper-focused on what we can do to help people build a credit history. All of the lender members that are part of our network, they report to the major credit bureaus so that people can start to build a credit history. So it's really, really important. And I wanted to sort of close my comments and talk to you about one of the ways that we are helping affordable housing providers. So affordable housing providers can include like public housing authorities, but the sort of commonality is that all of the renters that live in affordable housing are people that are low to modest income. And many, many of them are credit invisible. And so if you think about it, why is it fair, or actually it's not fair, that renters that pay their rent on time, month after month after month, it never ends up on their credit report? Whereas if someone is a homeowner and they're doing the same thing with their mortgage payment, it does show up on their credit report. And so we've been really involved for about 8 or 9 years now, going on the 9th year, with rent reporting. And again, our space is helping affordable housing providers. And so we work with them to help them start reporting their rent to the major credit bureaus. And so if you could share, I'm talking to like the tech coordinator, the guru, if you don't mind sharing that website that I shared earlier. And I just wanted to sort of share this with everyone. Or do you need me to do it? Okay, I'll do it. Hang on one second. So I'm hoping that everyone can see this. Someone jump in and tell me if you can't. But I wanted everyone to just essentially have this this website, and please take a look at it, share it widely. If you work with affordable housing providers, if you are an affordable housing provider, and also there's a section for renters. So for instance, if you're an affordable housing provider, it talks about ways to report, how you can report your rent through, directly the credit bureaus. You can work with a third-party rental provider. And we've also vetted some of these providers. And so you don't have to. These are a lot of these fintech companies that do rent reporting. You can contact them and find out what's involved. But we also have a section here for renters. So renters can find out how you can get credit on your own, even if your property manager is not doing this. And we have the whole process and how you can get hooked up and what are your options. And we have videos about it. These are some of the options if you are an individual renter and you want to start getting credit for paying your rent. So I just wanted to share that with you. And let you know, there are options, and more options every single day are coming about where people can start having different sort of what we call alternative data, but we're hoping it'll become more mainstream, but how they can have these types of alternative data appear on their credit report and really help them to go from credit invisible to becoming credit visible. And so thank you very much. I just wanted to share that with you, and I just really hope to, share the message about how it's so vitally important to help individuals that you counsel, that you work with, to understand the options to go from credit invisibility to credit visibility. So thank you very much.
Hey, thanks, Dara. This is really terrific context here. And I think it also illustrates the fact that while in the PERC study, we focused on mobile network operator data, to wireless telecoms data, there are many other proven payment data or alternative data sets that currently aren't in mainstream credit reports that, if fully reported, would benefit lower income persons, younger and elderly Americans, recent immigrants, lots of vulnerable populations could immediately benefit really without doing anything. They would not be burdened at all. Rental payment data is incredibly important for people who don't own homes. It's likely the single largest expenditure they make each month, and they're not getting credit for it. It speaks a lot to credit capacity. Someone who's able to pay $1,000 a month religiously, month in and month out, and not having that in their credit report is a big data gap. So, we feel again that closing these data gaps is important in terms of enhancing the current system, making it fairer and more inclusive for all. So, I think this segues very naturally into Bill Cheeks, who has experience really sort of both from industry and working in the trenches in financial literacy and education. And he can talk more about the consequences of the findings today in terms of suppression, deletion, and then why, again, addition is better than subtraction in terms of negative data. Bill Cheeks, over to you.
Thank you, Michael. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to with you today, and I got involved in this project because I work very closely with Dr. Turner, Patrick Walker, Ted Daniels, as well as Dara Duguay. They have provided you with a lot of information. I want to focus my attention on the work that I do with legislators, both at the state level as well as the national level. A lot of times they want to introduce legislation to address an issue. For instance, earlier today, Michael Turner and I were talking to a state legislator, and she has a problem in her district, and the problem is because she does have so many low wealth individuals as well as minority individuals, and she wanted to address the issue, but the way to address it really was not what she was going to focus on, and we helped to guide her. And that's one of the things that I'm looking at doing, because number one, I spent over 30 years, as Michael mentioned, with a credit reporting agency. And when I retired, I started working with all three of the credit reporting agencies, as well as the two credit scoring companies. So it has given me a great background. But the other piece that I want to talk about is education. I spent from 2002 to 2021 with Jumpstart Coalition as a regional director, and we focused on financial education. And also during that time, I focused on adult financial education, working with consumers mainly in the minority communities. And this is when we talk about suppression and deletion, and legislators wanting to implement this particular type of policy, it's not understanding, okay, Patrick provided you with the information. If you suppress the data, then lenders are going to look for higher scores. And who does that impact? It's the consumers who are low wealth, as well as mainly minority consumers. So I have to educate the legislators. This is how the system works. So why don't we focus on how do we get solutions for these consumers through financial education? Also, can we look at legislation that adds data? Michael mentioned something today in our conversation with this state legislator. Proven payment data. I'll refer to it as alternative data, and Dara has referred to the rental data. It's not known to a lot of folks that the difference in home ownership. For instance, if you are a white American, you have home ownership of about 73%. If you are a Black American, you have home ownership of about 43%. If you have a home, that means you have a credit report because most people don't buy their home and pay cash for it. So it's that's a big difference there, and I try to use that as an example of educating legislators as well as educating consumers. I said, let's look at how can we improve that number of consumers who own homes. Therefore, we can help with the data gap. Also, let's start early and look at financial education in schools. For instance, just this past weekend, Jumpstart Coalition educated 250 teachers from 46 states, and they are going back excited to teach young people while they are in school. And so we used to focus on high school, too late. We need to focus on elementary through high school as well as college and help folks make better decisions. So this is what I will focus my time on in the future, and that is helping to educate the consumers, especially in minority communities. Also, look at how can we provide education to our legislators so that they don't just look at, okay, this is a problem, I can legislate our way out of this. No, we can't. We must look at how can we educate our way out of this, and then look at good research, which we have done here with PERC and with the support of Society for Professional Education Development, partnering together. And I'm sure we will look at research such as this in the future. And this is the only way we can improve things for the people in America in the future. So those are my comments. I look forward to Michael closing out the session, and maybe we can answer some questions for those who are viewing this particular session.
Hey, Bill, thank you so very much. I know for many folks, when we come to them and talk to them about credit information sharing, credit risk assessment, it's a technical issue, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of day-to-day relevance. But the reality is that, and we've talked about this term credit invisibility, the CFPB estimates that the rate of credit invisibility in the United States is 20%, or roughly 1 in 5 credit eligible adults. But it's not evenly distributed across the entire country. There's tremendous variance. So in the lowest income quartile, the rate of credit invisibility is over 45%, which means that nearly half of the lowest income persons in America are credit invisible. And again, the rates tier down with the increase in income. But what we're talking about here is in the context of COVID and suppression deletion. The people who are thin file or no file, the thinner file are going to be especially vulnerable, and that correlates too oftentimes with income level. So, it's really important that lawmakers understand that in this instance, a bill or a policy that's intended to help vulnerable populations, as Patrick showed, is illusory. It would have, in fact, just the opposite consequence. And if the intent is to truly help people, then adding this predictive payment data would have that effect without the negative consequences. Now, why did we single out telecoms data as opposed to rental payment data or utility payment data? In this case, mobile network operators actually are large lenders. They lend nearly $200 billion annually to people that when you go and sign up for service and get one of these, they pull your credit report and they make an eligibility determination. They look at your application data, they look at your credit report contents, they look at your credit score, and they determine things like which plans you'll be eligible for, how many handsets you qualify for, whether or not you'll have a security deposit requirement. And then, whether they'll make a loan for you, right? An installment loan for buying a smartphone. So the fact that they're already reporting collections, very late payment data, demonstrates that they have the capacity to report consistently to credit bureaus. If they were to also report positive payment data, particularly because they're lenders, they're not small lenders either. I mean, extending $200 billion in credit annually, to our minds, that means they are creditors. They are creditors under the definition in ECOA, under the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, and they're creditors under the definition in the Fair Credit Reporting Act as amended by the FACT Act. So they should be reporting fully. It's inexcusable that they're not. So this is really low-hanging fruit, especially because 1 in 5 of us have collections complements of M&Os. And for subprime borrowers, that number is more than 60%. So, if you're looking for something to do, if you're looking for something to mobilize around, if you're looking for some communication or takeaway from this presentation, it's reach out to your state and federal lawmakers and raise awareness of this. The Credit Access and Inclusion Act is something that has been in Congress for 10 years. It passed 2 Congresses ago, 435 to nothing, and then it fell apart. It's been reintroduced this year and this congressional session. Hopefully, we can move that forward. But this is something that needs immediate attention. It's something that's been elevating importance, and happily, there's a costless, easy solution that we can implement and can have the impact of protecting consumers and enhancing the system to make it fairer and more inclusive. So let me put forward to the audience. If you've got any questions, please type them in the chat box. But in the interim, perhaps Dara or Patrick can talk about what are some of the really achievable objectives that you see from alternative data, rental payment data, where we can really integrate this data and take it to scale in the nearer term to end credit invisibility. What are some of the opportunities beyond the mobile network data? Patrick?
Sure. Thankfully, the latest credit scores by the major producers, FICO, VantageScore, that they can all utilize the alternative data that we're talking about. I mean, in many respects, it's not really alternative data anymore. They can all see and use rental payment data. They can use utility data, telecom data, and other data sets. So there's no technical barrier to this. Certainly, as we discussed, the large telecom companies are in a great position to report. They have sufficient IT systems to do so. I would say that the same is the case for the major utilities in this country, right? They also report collections to the credit reporting agencies. They don't typically report on-time payments. So I'd say that the largest utilities are also part of that low-hanging fruit. I'll let Dara cover some of it. I think she's working with rental payment data, and that's also seen by the credit scores and is also low-hanging fruit.
Sure.
Maybe you can add a little color to that. I mean, most people think of a a typical landlord is a person renting an apartment above their garage. Um, how easily available is rental permit data, and what are some of the challenges in terms of data, and what are some of the opportunities to take this to scale?
Yeah, I think some of the challenges are, especially when we're working with public housing authorities, is bureaucracy. So, for instance, the New York City Public Housing Authority, called NYCHA, they have 500,000 residents, and it took us like 4 to 5 years to get them to get started, to just start to report some of their tenants' rental payments. So there's bureaucracy. There's also for public housing, for affordable housing that get money from HUD. There's not a lot of flexibility in the funds to use it for any expenses related to things like rent reporting, because we find that many affordable housing providers don't want to become credentialed and become what's called a direct data furnisher to the credit bureaus, because they don't want the responsibility and having to answer consumer disputes and learn how to do credit reporting. So they prefer to have a third party payment processor. Like I showed on our website, all of the different fintechs that we vetted that do this, and they can contract with them, but that is a service that's available for a fee. And so if they don't have the money set aside in their budget to pay for this service, then they can't get started. And so we're talking to HUD about giving more flexibility, or actually providing more funds directly for credit reporting. So those are things in the works. But one of the things I wanted to mention, just for the attendees, that's something that you can do yourself, is Experian, which is one of the major credit bureaus, has Experian Boost, BOOST. So if you just Google Experian Boost, it's a way that you can give your own permission to allow the information that's on your bank account, and some of your credit cards. If you make payments through either your bank account or your credit card for things like telecoms, so your cell phone, utilities, you can give your permission for those monthly payments that are paid either through your bank account or through your credit card to appear on your credit report. And so Experian Boost is a way that you might want to explore. It's free, and it's a way where you can have power as a consumer to give permission for this data to reside on your Experian credit report. So that's just an example of an innovation out there, helping consumers to get some of this data that doesn't normally show up on your credit report to show up.
And actually, I just want to piggyback on that and just highlight how valuable rental reporting data would be. So PERC did a study with HUD and public housing authorities, 3 PHAs across the country. And what we found is that among the PHA residents in our sample, up to 50% were credit invisible, didn't have one of the scores that we used in our report. And either score that was used in our report, and we used both a FICO and a Vantage score, in either case, the reporting of the rental data lifted about 15% of the sample from either subprime or credit invisible, where they had no score, up to something above subprime, such as near prime or prime. So this actually would have a large impact on many residents.
Hey, Patrick, great additional point there to provide some context. I wanted to move from sort of the solutions and the challenges to, in the trenches, the day-to-day experience that folks who are struggling to get credit confront. Now, why are we talking about credit? Well, credit is necessary for asset building and wealth creation. And the two primary means by which people build assets and generate wealth in this country are home ownership and small business ownership. Now, Bill touched a little bit on the disparity in home ownership rates among African Americans and Caucasian populations. But I'd like to talk more about what you're hearing when you interact with different constituents around the country in terms of, is this really a problem? Are people really struggling with credit access? And if so, because they have real credit needs, how are they meeting them? Because I think it's important for the audience and for policymakers to understand that while this is a technical issue on first blush, this actually matters in the lives of millions of people day to day. So Ted or Bill, either of you, please.
Ted, go ahead.
There you are, Bill. Yes, well, they're finding different ways. A lot of people just don't know. They don't know that even the idea of using booths, as Dara mentioned, or asking their landlord to find a way to report their rental payment. They just don't know they can ask that question. You know, um, so and then you find situations where how they get access to credit. Well, we have alternative financial services out there like payday loans, rental centers, pawn shops. They seek that financing non-traditionally, which is very expensive, and it causes a drainage on that financial resources. So it limits their ability to move up, in terms of gaining, uh, uh, not only gaining wealth, it's gaining a better standard of living because the interest cost is so high. I think a study came out in 2019. It's saying that uh, these alternative financial services, like payday lenders, rental centers on down the line, uh, they acquired $139 billion from the African American and Hispanic community in the form of interest and fees. That's a lot of money, coming out of our two communities, But they were able to get by with it because if you go back, you talk about legislation here. When we had the financial crisis and Dodd-Frank came into being, um, predatory lenders, alternative financial services were not included in Dodd-Frank. you know. So they were free to go out and do what they wanted to do and just be subject to state laws. And the state laws vary from state to state. You may find a payday loan in Alabama for 300%. You may walk over to Mississippi, could be 40%. You know, so it takes you forever to get it paid off, and sometimes they just give up, and this information is not reported. So they seek those ways. So that's why I said, early on, if we can get more people into the mainstream and use traditional lending services, we'll be better off. So, and this idea of suppressing data, which will cause people, lenders, to start making arbitrary decisions, as Patrick showed, it just makes you're almost back to where we are with the predatory lenders. And so that's what's happening. If here in DC, if and they load the communities up. If you drive in Southeast DC, you'll see payday lenders all over the place. If you go up Northwest, you don't see them. And somebody told me they have more payday lenders, rental centers, and pawn shops in Mississippi than they have McDonald's restaurants. So and because back to Bill said it's a financial literacy issue too, trying to teach them, how these things work and how they can avoid, getting caught in the trap. And that's what we do, dealing with those young people, dealing with minorities, to try to to teach them exactly how the system works and how to get out of it and how you can limit the drainage of your financial resources by using these alternative services, and seeking ways around it. Be inventive. I like the idea. I like the word that Dara used, being inventive. Look, have your cell phone bill taken out of your checking account. Establish a checking account, or pay for a credit card. Some way where you have that constant flow of payments, on time payments. So you can increase your credit score. So when you apply for a loan to get a car, or it's cheaper. So that's what we're trying to teach them, to find ways to manage the financial resources and maximize the financial resources by getting more information, so they can make better decisions and staying away from those alternative financial services that could cause a tremendous drainage on their financial resources. Yes, Bill.
Yeah, Ted, you basically covered all of the items. And one of the things from the education standpoint, I'm working with many of the nonprofits, because they are really interested in this topic now. When I got involved and Dara got involved in financial education in the mid 90s, people looked at us strangely when we said financial education, what is needed. But now, when you have the Fortune 500 CEOs signing on with Operation Hope for this financial literacy now program, it is something that's impacting the workplace. It's not only people who are low wealth, but lower income folks in the workplace. Delta Airlines, they've put up financial literacy, financial education programs in their major hubs. So this is really important as we move forward, is helping to not just educate the folks with no file, but the folks with a credit file, but making incorrect decisions. For instance, I was on the board with the police chief in Atlanta, and he said when he went out in the parking lot and saw the cars that many of the policemen were driving, he said, "I know they cannot afford those cars based on what we are paying them." So he implemented a financial education program, and even in our jail. So that same thing is happening. So I just think we need to redouble our efforts and look at partnerships, because we are not going to get out of this without with just legislation, but also as a group, based on the work you are doing at PERC, Michael and Patrick. We need to continue to provide data and push to get proven payment or alternative data reported. That's going to really help a lot of consumers. So those are my comments, Michael. I'll turn it back to you.
Well, and I like the idea too, because we drive we use research to drive our education. So it's not like this is what Ted Danger is saying, but this is what the research says. And this is how you can use it for your own benefit. As we reached thousands of, like, even so far this year, since August, we reached over almost 5,000. As college students, and we can tell them how this whole process works, so they've been informed, they can make better decisions. We just did a nationwide webinar with one of our partners recently, and one of our ambassadors went down and just asked a question: "Do you know this about credit?" They got no. They got all these no's and maybe got one yes. So there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
In terms of credit, dealing with credit. And when you talk to uh, um, the millennials and young adults, uh, two things they want to talk about this day today, and we always try to be relevant in our financial education, is that they want to know more about credit, number one, and they want to know how to make investments. And those are the things. So we're in the right spot, in terms of uh, providing information, yeah, that will be accepted because they are asking for it, and having data to support what we're saying, and having other means and innovative tools available to us to help them. I think it's just fantastic. I like this idea too about this rental center, assistance center that the Credit Bill Alliance has, because we have so many um, Black Americans who are renters, and some, they are paying the same amount of money per each month in rental payments that they would make as mortgage payment, you know, And we got to find a way to get that information out so they can understand that. I was out did a session over some time ago over in Northeast DC, and the guy was telling me he pays $1,000, and he was a veteran, and he didn't know that he'd have to pay anything down to get a house. And I said, look, so there's a need. There's a need for all of this to information to be made available to enhance the financial well-being, as I said before, and also deal with the economic disparities. Because I think knowledge also can close these economic disparities too, and not have to rely just on legislation.
Well, Ted, I think you summed it up very nicely. And before I thank all the panelists for all of your input today, I just want to try and tie it together. Bill talked about proven payment data and alternative data. The reason we call it proven payment data is because there's a bigger world than just the United States. And the data that we're calling alternative data, the energy utility, the telecoms, the rental payment data, in most countries around the world, it's fully reported to credit bureaus and has been for a long time. In fact, according to the World Bank, it's over 90 countries where energy utility and telecoms data and rental data in many cases is already fully reported. So we in the United States are not the leaders, we're very much the laggards, and it's time we caught up with the rest of the world and gave our citizens the benefits that people around the world have been enjoying for years. And I say this because now we're talking about research. It's a very common ploy for lawmakers to want to punt something down the road by saying, well, this is new and we don't understand it, so let's research it. And that's a 10-year delay. We've got 20 years of research on this in this country. It's been done in this country in a limited capacity. So now is the time to act, not the time to research. The research is there. It's proven because over 90 countries around the world have been doing it without incident. It's time that Americans, particularly vulnerable Americans, lower income Americans, younger elderly members of minority communities, got these benefits. And I'm delighted that our research can support that and we can prevent unintended consequences from suppression and deletion of negative payment data in an effort to help people. So it's two sides of the same coin. We look forward to our continued partnership with Ted and his organization to educate lawmakers, educate the public, the media, and help raise awareness. I want to thank Dara and Bill for offering their unique perspectives to this discussion, and Patrick for bringing the quantitative juice to the table as always. I don't see any other questions from the audience. And Ted, how are we on time?
We have time for questions. Let's see. We have any down here? I don't see any. So, but we do have the time. But I guess we've been pretty clear about what we were saying. Uh, we can. I think you wrapped it up well, and so we have a little downtime before we go to the next session here. And I really appreciate you all joining us for the conference. I think this is very insightful, and I think what we shared here is going to be used by many people. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Ted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, here's
Thanks,
a question. Oh, here's a question. Are we teaching high school students about being credit invisible?
I'm happy to take that if you want.
Yes. Okay. Go
ahead. Sure. I met Bill Cheeks a million years ago when I was the executive director for the Jumpstart Coalition for Personal Financial Literacy. It's a national network group that is working on trying to get financial education embedded in the schools. So the first thing I wanted to say is that we do not, and that's N-O-T, we do not in this country have a national curriculum. So to try to get anything into the schools, it's not that easy. So for instance, in the United Kingdom, they do have a national curriculum. They were able to embed in financial education and everyone gets it. That is not the way it is here. It's a state by state, and sometimes it's a local school district by local school district, as in, for instance, Texas. It's very much a local school district decision. And so the Jumpstart Coalition works really hard on a local level, and they're making some progress, but there's still only about 50% of the states, so only half of the states that have any requirement to embed financial education into public schools. So they're working primarily in public schools. And I must say that when they are successful, most of the financial education is embedded into high school, usually junior or senior year, and usually into an economics class. So they're marrying sort of the theory with the practicality. But if you go to jumpstart.org, so again, it's jumpstart.org, they have a wonderful library of resources, and you can find curriculum that exists for even preschool students. And so go there. There's thousands of curriculum. You can choose by grade. So you can, if you have a first grader, you can click on first grade. Many of these materials are free. If you're a parent, print it out. You can start teaching them if they're not learning in school. But yes, a lot of people are saying the earlier the better. Absolutely. The earlier the better, and often.
That's right. As a matter of fact, there was a professor out of Portland State University did a study on students out of state of Georgia, where they require a economics course, passive economic course, or personal finance course before graduation, and it found that the findings were that those students who took the course had better credit scores. They knew how to manage credit, as opposed to other states where, as Dara said, uh, do not have a course that includes anything associated with credit. So I think if you infuse credit in other personal finance subject in the curriculum, it's going to help out a lot of people. It's going to help a lot of
Right.
people. Yes.
And just to piggyback on some of the questions that are coming through, yes, Susan, there is a ton of financial education curriculum out there. And again, I just wanted to repeat, go to jumpstart.org and look for their library. And it's called the Clearinghouse. There's thousands of materials there. So please, please, please do not reinvent the wheel. If you are a teacher, a parent, go to jumpstart.org and click on their Clearinghouse. And then to talk about Robert's question, how do we get personal financial management as a requirement? Again, this is not a country that has national education requirements at all. Unfortunately, certain countries do, not this one. And so it's very much a state by state issue, or a district by district issue as to what is taught in the curriculum and what are the requirements in schools. So it is not something. There are certainly national standards. The Treasury Department has come out with them. There's national standards for subjects like economics that include some personal finance issues. But that's about as good as we can get, is getting it embedded into national standards. But getting a requirement, it just doesn't work like that in this country. And I'm sure Bill can speak to that.
Oh yeah, it is. That is the case. It's why education is so varied, from state to state, from high school to high school, because we don't have a national standard. Every school district, make a decision on what the curriculum is going to be. I always tell people that a high school diploma out of Maryland is not the same high school diploma out of, say, Mississippi, Alabama. It's because the curriculums are different. And there's not even, but we expect people to come into society at the same level because they all have a diploma, right? But the education is varied from state to state. So we need to do something about that.
And Susan just added a comment that Prince George's County in Maryland now has a financial literacy graduation requirement, but it
Yes.
took a long time to make it happen. And I echo that. This is a long, long process.
Right. So
A
that's a
long
local.
process.
That's how-
And quite frankly, like one at Jumpstart, we learned that some of the forces out there that were against this the most were the educators. And it wasn't that the teachers didn't think that this was important. It was just that they already had so many other requirements. And so that it was a natural, like, oh my gosh, don't give me something else that I need to have to do. And so there's only so many hours in the day. So there's a competition between competing priorities and what we should teach in schools.
So I wanted to put out there as well, Bill Cheeks and Perk, we had done a study some years back on personal credit report education. So this is not broader financial literacy, but this is very much tailored to how do I read my credit report? How do I understand the contents? how do I increase my credit score? Like, what can I do behaviorally to improve my credit score so that I can qualify for a higher credit limit or an auto loan or a mortgage loan? And what we found was that people who partook in a discussion with a credit bureau that offered personalized credit report education for even just less than an hour, we actually tracked them over time and saw statistically significant increase and sustained increase in credit score versus similar populations. And so, we think that at least when it comes to understanding credit report content and understanding how you can improve your credit score, there are pretty simple tools out there that aren't expensive, that don't require you to go for a lengthy course or pay hundreds of dollars, but you can do remotely, which is very important. And we had one person, Janine, who Bill and I spent time on Capitol Hill with, where she was recruited through an Operation Hope platform. Our partners in this, by the way, were United Way Atlanta, Operation Hope, and the Urban League. And over the course of, I don't know, 18 months, she was able to increase her credit score over 150 points subsequent to personalized credit education. So much so that not only was she able to qualify for an initial auto loan she needed to have her car fixed to keep her new job, but her credit score was increased enough to qualify her for a better job that enabled her to get her first ever mortgage loan. So I know that's, an extreme example, but this is the difference that personalized credit education can make. Even a narrower, understanding my credit report, understanding how my behavior affects my score, and understanding what my score means in terms of access to affordable credit. The impact this can make on a person's life is profound.
Oh, yeah.
Bill, if you want to add anything on that?
No, I just know the good credit score actually helps a person feel better about themselves. So I know this audience that we have at this conference, they probably work with a lot of consumers. So this is why I focus my comments on financial education. For instance, I'll be in front of, on my computer, but in front of college students from Georgia Tech tonight, helping them to understand, because these young people will be leaving Georgia Tech. Many of them will leave with a six-figure income, but they will go out and buy the wrong car, get in a high-cost apartment and everything, and then not participate in the 401k plan that's being provided at work due to lack of financial knowledge.
Hey, Patrick, I wanted you to take a question that just come up because you've researched this. Consumers are using Credit Karma and Credit Sesame as the solutions to improving their credit. Is this the trend, and is it the answer? In the personalized credit education study I referred to, you analyzed Credit Karma, Credit Sesame, sort of more generic education. Why don't you talk about that versus personalized credit education?
Sure, absolutely. So, yeah, no, definitely, it is part of a trend because I know Credit Karma, the last time I looked, had tens of millions of people on their platform using that. I've used it as well. It's definitely a good source of more generic information, as you point out. It also shows you your actual credit score, right? But there's also additional, more specialized credit score solutions and simulators that are available in other sites. So, yeah, it's definitely part of the solution, but I don't think it's the entire solution. Especially given the opportunity to have a financial coach available, or to have some sort of like interactive process where you can ask questions. That would also be another part of the solution.
Mhm.
I don't
I
know if any
wanted
other
to just,
panelists want to comment on that same question.
yeah, I just wanted to add that we at Credit Builders Alliance had a webinar for our members on this. And Consumer Action, which is a nonprofit group, they did a lot of research also, like Patrick did, on these sites. And they found out that when you sign up, you need to be really, really careful about unchecking this marketing, tiny little box, because what happens is that's how they make money. So, afterwards you get, all these emails with, you qualify for this and this and this and this. And they told me that, many people don't see this pre-checked marketing, receiving marketing emails box. And it was really hard to get themselves taken off of it. And so they were just flooded with a lot of offers. And so just to keep that in mind, that if you may want the offers, that's great. But if you don't, just when you're signing up, be very cognizant of that.
Yeah, excellent point. It's frightening how many boxes we have to uncheck on websites on a daily basis anymore. So,
Just to piggyback, if I can, just to piggyback on one of the questions that came in from Kevin, how do we educate educators about the importance of personal finance? And I would say that, like, for instance, economics is usually taught very theoretical, especially macroeconomics. So if you can make this real life, and you can embed in some personal finance examples, that will go underneath the theoretical approach, kids will see that it really impacts their lives. And so then you're going to learn both, right? You're going to get their attention, they're going to learn the theory, and then learn the practicality at the same time. So it might help their academic performance if they see how this relates to them. The old adage, what's in it for me? You can tie it back to that. Also, if you're doing math, and if kids, don't like math, or it's difficult, or, I have a 12-year-old daughter. She says all the time, why do I need to learn, fractions or whatever? I have a calculator, I mean, if you can do certain exercises and then do it with money, a calculating interest rate, or, then all of a sudden it becomes real life. So I would say that that's a good approach to show teachers how they can get more interest actually in the subjects that they're required to teach.
Well, I also think that you find any opportunities that you can find where you can teach the teachers,
Yes.
because they don't know, so they don't understand the value of teaching it. So you got that issue going too, but they really don't know that it really is a life skill, and how it can impact um, a student that student that finishes with a 4.0 without any knowledge of how to manage his or her credit would not be that successful. But I think that's a big issue. Getting the teachers to teaching the teachers the same thing, so they have a better appreciation of personal finance and how to manage it and all the key components, because that's a big void really in their education. But they were never taught when they were in college a um, a personal finance course. They never took a personal finance course in college. They were just taught to be teachers, you know, and that was it. So there's nothing transferred to the classroom associated with credit, budgeting, setting financial goals, or investing. That mind is not there. Just teaching that course in biology, or mathematics, and that's it. That's where they are. Yeah. hmm
well, I don't see more questions coming in. I do want to thank the audience for the flurry of questions at the end. Very helpful, very provocative, and some excellent responses from the panel. Ted, do you want to close us out?
No, that's good. I just really I'm excited about what we have accomplished with this research here, and its usefulness, and I hope the policymakers who get a chance to review it take it to heart, and realize that some actions can further the economic disparities that exist in this country, and become institutionalized, and hurt not only the individuals but also affect the efficiency of the economy. You know, and so just want to thank you, Michael and Patrick, and all the good work that Dara is doing and Bill is doing. To try to help help you know individuals enhance their financial well being. Okay, and thanks very
Thank
much
you.
for you coming and joining us at the conference. This is it was very additive to our agenda, and I look forward to working with you in the future.
All right.
All right,
Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
thank you.